I always thought I was a good husband and a good father. I said it to myself every morning while tying my tie. I'm doing this for you, I told Linda. I'm doing this for our family. She usually smiled and said, "We know." Emily would hug my leg and laugh. "Daddy, don't be late." "Work is killing you," Linda once said on the phone. "I'll be home soon," I replied. "Just one more deal." She hung up fast. I didn't notice how often she did that. At dinner, I asked, "Why are you so quiet lately?" "I'm tired," Linda said, eyes on her plate. Emily looked at me. "Daddy, are you angry?" "No," I said quickly. "Never at you." I believed love meant trust, so I trusted without questions. When Linda stepped outside to answer calls, I told myself she needed space. When she locked her phone, I laughed and said, "Privacy is healthy, right?" "Of course," she replied too fast. The night Emily collapsed, everything changed. She screamed, then fell still. I shouted, "Call an ambulance!" Linda's hands shook as she dialed. At the hospital, a nurse said, "We need blood samples." "Take mine," I said. "Anything." Dr. Harris met us later. He cleared his throat. "Mr. Collins, may I speak with you alone?" Linda stood up. "I'll come too." He hesitated. "It's better if—" "I'm her mother," Linda snapped. The room felt small. Dr. Harris looked at the file, then at me. "The blood test doesn't match." I frowned. "What do you mean, doesn't match?" He spoke slowly. "Biologically, you are not the father." I laughed once. "That's not funny." "It's not a joke," he said quietly. My ears rang. "Run it again," I said. "You mixed it up." "We already did," he replied. "Twice." I turned to Linda. "Tell him he's wrong." She stared at the floor. "Linda?" My voice cracked. "Say something." Emily whimpered. "Daddy?" I held her hand. "I'm here," I said, though my chest felt hollow. Dr. Harris said gently, "She'll be fine physically." "Physically," I repeated. Linda whispered, "I never wanted you to find out like this." I looked at her. "Find out what?" She swallowed. "I was lonely." "That's it?" I asked. "Lonely makes a child?" Dr. Harris shifted. "I'll give you a moment." He left. The door clicked shut. I asked the question that burned my throat. Who is her real father? Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. Tears fell, but she said nothing. Silence pressed harder than any scream. My memories twisted. Emily's smile, Linda's kisses, my sacrifices. I felt myself breaking, piece by piece, standing in that white room, realizing my whole life had been built on a lie. I sat down hard. "So that's it," I said. "Years of truth erased." Linda whispered, "Please don't hate her." "I'm not looking at her," I said. "I'm looking at you." Emily squeezed my fingers. "Daddy, am I bad?" "No," I said fast. "You did nothing wrong." Linda reached for me. "We can fix this." "Fix?" I asked. "Tell me when you plan to tell me." She shook her head. I was scared. "Of losing me?" I asked. "Or losing the life I paid for?" Her silence answered. Dr. Harris returned. "You should go home and rest." I nodded. "Yes, we should." "You should go home and rest." I nodded. "Yes, we should." Linda asked, "Together?" I didn't answer. I kissed Emily's forehead. "Be brave," I whispered. She smiled weakly. "I love you, Daddy." Those words stabbed deeper than any truth. I walked out slowly, knowing nothing behind that door was real anymore. I closed my eyes, breathed once, and promised myself I would remember this moment forever, because something inside me had died, and something colder, sharper, was being born. The hallway lights flickered. Linda called my name. I kept walking, every step heavy, every heartbeat louder than the last. This was the day my life quietly ended forever here. I reached home after the hospital, and Linda followed me inside like a stranger. I said, "Sit down." She stood near the bed. I said, "Now." She sat slowly. I asked, "How long?" She whispered, "Years." I laughed without humor. "Years?" I repeated. "While I paid bills," she said. "You were never there." I stepped closer. "I was working for you." She shook her head. "You chose work over us." I asked, "And Jason?" She froze. "You knew his name," she said. "I grew up with him," I replied. "You slept with him." She cried. "It wasn't like that at first." I said, "Say it." She whispered, "I love him." My chest burned. "In my bed?" I asked. She nodded. I punched the wall and said, "Did he laugh at me?" She said nothing. I asked again, "Did he?" She whispered, "Sometimes." I felt small. "Call him," I said, "now." She begged, "Please don't." I said, "Call him." She dialed. Jason answered, "Linda?" I took the phone. "It's me." He said, "Listen." I said, "How long?" He went quiet. "Answer me." He said, "Since you were busy." I said, "You were my brother." He replied, "You chose money." Emily opened the door and said, "Daddy?" Linda cried, "Go back." Emily looked at me. "Why are you shouting?" I knelt. "I'm not angry at you," she said. "Mommy is crying." Jason said, "I didn't mean." I hung up. Emily asked, "Did I do something bad?" I said, "Never." Linda reached for her. Emily stepped back, eyes scared. That look broke me. I stood up and said, "I trusted you both." Linda said, "We can fix this." I said, "You broke it on purpose." She said, "I was lonely." I replied, "I was faithful." Emily whispered, "Please don't leave." My throat closed. I packed a bag in silence. Linda said, "Where will you go?" I said, "Somewhere honest." Rain hit my face outside. I walked without looking back. I felt empty, not angry, just tired of loving people who never loved me back. I walked until my shoes soaked through. My phone buzzed. Linda texted, "Come home." I didn't reply. Jason called. I answered and said, "Don't." He said, "We were careless." I said, "You were cruel." He said, "She chose me." I said, "I chose loyalty." He laughed softly. "You chose control." I stopped under a streetlight. "You slept in my house." He said, "You built a cage." I said, "You broke a family." He said, "Families break themselves." I hung up again. I heard Emily's voice in my head. "Daddy," read to me. I whispered, "I'm sorry." Rain mixed with my breath. I sat on a bench. A stranger asked, "You okay?" I said no. He nodded like he understood. Linda called again. I answered. She said, "Please come back." I asked, "Did you ever plan to tell me?" She cried, "I didn't know how." I said, "You knew how to lie." She said, "I love you." I replied, "You loved comfort." She said, "I'm scared." I said, "So was I." She said, "Emily needs you." I said, "She needs truth." Silence followed. She whispered, "What do you want?" I said, "Space." She said, "For how long?" I said, "Until the pain stops." She said, "It never stops." I ended the call. I stood and kept walking. Cars passed. Windows glowed. I felt like a ghost. I promised myself I wouldn't beg, wouldn't scream, wouldn't destroy myself for people who chose betrayal. I said out loud, "This ends tonight." The rain answered. I kept moving, carrying nothing but the weight of a life that had already left me. I checked into a cheap motel. The clerk asked, "One night?" I said, "Yes." In the room, I sat on the bed and stared at my hands. I said, "Breathe." My phone stayed silent. I imagined morning without lies. I imagined sleep without fear. I didn't feel brave. I felt done. I lay back, listening to Rain on Metal, and told myself, you survived the truth. Now survive tomorrow. I closed my eyes, counted my breaths, and accepted that walking away was the only promise I could still keep for myself alone. I reached home after the hospital, and Linda followed me inside like a stranger. I said, sit down. She stood near the bed. I said, now. She sat slowly. I asked, how long? She whispered, years. I laughed without humor. Years? I repeated. While I paid bills, she said. You were never there. I stepped closer. I was working for you. She shook her head. You chose work over us. I asked. And Jason? She froze. You knew his name, she said. I grew up with him, I replied. You slept with him. She cried. It wasn't like that at first. I said, say it. She whispered, I love him. My chest burned. In my bed? I asked. She nodded. I punched the wall and said, did he laugh at me? She said nothing. I asked again, did he? She whispered, sometimes. I felt small. Call him, I said. Now. She begged, please don't. I said, call him. She dialed. Jason answered, Linda? I took the phone. It's me, he said. Listen, I said, how long? He went quiet. Answer me. He said, since you were busy. I said, you were my brother. He replied, you chose money. Emily opened the door and said, Daddy? Linda cried, go back. Emily looked at me. Why are you shouting? I knelt. I'm not angry at you, she said. Mommy is crying. Jason said, I didn't mean. I hung up. Emily asked, did I do something bad? I said, never. Linda reached for her. Emily stepped back, eyes scared. That look broke me. I stood up and said, I trusted you both. Linda said, we can fix this. I said, you broke it on purpose. She said, I was lonely. I replied, I was faithful. Emily whispered, please don't leave. My throat closed. I packed a bag in silence. Linda said, where will you go? I said, somewhere honest. Rain hit my face outside. I walked without looking back. I felt empty, not angry, just tired of loving people who never loved me back. I walked until my shoes soaked through. My phone buzzed. Linda texted, come home. I didn't reply. Jason called. I answered and said, don't. He said, we were careless. I said, you were cruel. He said, she chose me. I said, I chose loyalty. He laughed softly. You chose control. I stopped under a streetlight. You slept in my house. He said, you built a cage. I said, you broke a family. He said, families break themselves. I hung up again. I heard Emily's voice in my head. Daddy, read to me. I whispered, I'm sorry. Rain mixed with my breath. I sat on a bench. A stranger asked, you okay? I said no. He nodded like he understood. Linda called again. I answered. She said, please come back. I asked, did you ever plan to tell me? She cried, I didn't know how. I said, you knew how to lie. She said, I love you. I replied, you loved comfort. She said, I'm scared. I said, so was I. She said, Emily needs you. I said, she needs truth. Silence followed. She whispered, what do you want? I said, space. She said, for how long? I said, until the pain stops. She said, it never stops. I ended the call. I stood and kept walking. Cars passed. Windows glowed. I felt like a ghost. I promised myself I wouldn't beg, wouldn't scream, wouldn't destroy myself for people who chose betrayal. I said out loud, this ends tonight. The rain answered. I kept moving, carrying nothing but the weight of a life that had already left me. I checked into a cheap motel. The clerk asked, one night? I said yes. In the room, I sat on the bed and stared at my hands. I said, breathe. My phone stayed silent. I imagined morning without lies. I imagined sleep without fear. I didn't feel brave. I felt done. I lay back, listening to Rain on Metal, and told myself, you survived the truth. Now survive tomorrow. I closed my eyes, counted my breaths, and accepted that walking away was the only promise I could still keep for myself alone. I drank because silence was louder than noise. I told the bartender, another. He asked, you sure? I said, I'm already gone. He poured. I drank. My phone buzzed. Linda's name. I laughed and said, "Too late." A man beside me said, "Rough night?" I said, "Rough life." He nodded like that explained everything. I stood up unsteady. He said, "Don't drive." I said, "I don't care." Outside, the air cut my lungs. I sat in my car and said, "Just go." The engine answered. The road blurred. I shouted, "Why wasn't I enough?" No one replied. I pressed harder. A voice in my head said, "Slow down." I said, "Shut up." Headlights flashed. Tires screamed. The world spun. I felt weightless. Then pain exploded. Metal crushed. Glass sang. I tasted blood. I laughed weakly. So this is it. I couldn't move. My chest burned. I whispered, "Mom." I hadn't said that word in years. My thoughts scattered. I saw Emily running. "Dad, wait." I saw Linda smiling in our kitchen. I saw Jason behind me, laughing softly. I said, "I trusted you." My breath rattled. I thought, if I had another chance, I would walk away without begging. I felt cold. Sirens wailed far away. I said, "I'm sorry." Darkness closed like water over my head. "Wake up." I gasped and sat up. My heart pounded. I shouted, "I'm alive?" The room looked wrong. Smaller. Familiar. I grabbed my phone. The date glowed. 10 years ago. I laughed and cried at once. "No way!" I ran to the mirror. My face was younger. My eyes clearer. I said, "This isn't real." I slapped myself. Pain answered. I sat on the bed. My hands shook. Think. I opened the calendar. No Emily. No betrayal yet. My phone rang. Linda's name. My stomach twisted. I answered. "Hello?" She said. "Are you coming home late again?" I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "I'm on my way." She paused. "Are you okay?" I said. "I am now." I hung up. I whispered, "Breathe." Memories lined up like warnings. I said, "I won't ignore them." I stood and felt calm settle in my chest. Not panic, not joy, calm. I said, "This time is mine." I opened a notebook and wrote one line, "Walk away without begging." I heard my younger voice inside saying, "You'll mess it up." I replied, "Watch me." I looked at my hands again. "Second chance," I said. "I won't waste you." I smiled. Outside, the sun rose like nothing had ended. "Everything ends," I said. "I choose how." I picked up my keys. My phone buzzed again. Linda texted, "Don't be late." I typed, "I won't." I meant something else. I stepped outside and felt the air. "No more drinking," I said. "No more chasing love that hurts." I laughed softly. "No more begging." A car passed. Life moved on. I walked forward, carrying memory like a map, knowing where every road really led. And for the first time, I was ready to choose a different ending. I woke up before Linda and watched her sleep. I said quietly, "You look peaceful." She stirred and asked, "Why are you staring?" I smiled. "Just thinking." She studied my face. "You're acting strange." I said, "Am I?" She shrugged. "You're calmer." I nodded. "I learned something." At breakfast, she said, "You didn't check your phone once." I replied, "I didn't need to." She laughed nervously. "That's new," I said. "People change." She asked, "Did something happen?" I looked at her eyes. Nothing at all. She didn't believe me. Jason called later. "Hey, brother," he said. "Long time." I said, "Busy." He laughed. "Still chasing money?" I said, "Still chasing peace." He paused. "You okay?" I replied, "Better than ever." He said, "Let's grab a drink." I said, "No." He joked, "Did Linda ground you?" I smiled. I grounded myself. Silence followed. He said, "You're weird lately." I answered, "I'm awake." I hung up. At dinner, Linda said, "You didn't argue with me today." I said, "Why would I?" She frowned. "You always argue." I said, "I'm tired of noise." She leaned closer. "Are you mad?" I shook my head. "No," she whispered. "Are you hiding something?" I smiled. "No." She watched me eat. "You're distant." I said, "I'm focused." She snapped. "On what?" I said, "The future." She laughed sharply. "Since when?" I said, "Since now." She pushed her plate away. "You make me nervous," I replied. "That's not my job." Her eyes hardened. "Don't talk like that." I said, "Like what?" She said, Like you don't need me. I wiped my mouth. I don't need chaos. She stood. You're cruel, I said. I'm calm. She said, that's worse. I almost laughed. I checked our bank accounts that night. I said to myself, slow and clean. I opened a new account. I said, just in case. Linda walked in. What are you doing? I said, planning. She crossed her arms. Planning what? I looked up. Stability. She scoffed. Without me? I said, with or without? She stared. You used to ask me first. I said, I used to beg. She flinched. For what? I replied. For honesty? She said, you're accusing me? I smiled. No. She said, then why say that? I said, because it's true. She backed away. You scare me. I said, good. She slapped the door shut. Jason showed up the next day. Man to man, he said. Linda's upset. I said, she'll survive. He leaned on the counter. You're acting superior, I said. I'm acting done, he smirked. You think you're smarter now? I looked at him. I think you're careless, he laughed. Careless gets results. I said, careless leaves messes. He stepped closer. You sound threatening. I said, I'm not threatening anyone. He said, then what are you doing? I replied, leaving quietly. He frowned. From what? I said, from lies. He scoffed. You can't escape everything. I smiled. Watch me. He muttered. You're different. I said, you noticed. That night, Linda whispered, do you still love me? I said, I respect myself. She turned away. You're cold. I said, I'm clear. She cried softly. I felt nothing move inside. I stared at the ceiling and thought, this is how freedom starts. In silence, I planned every step, every exit, every goodbye. I would never say out loud. My calm was armor now. My heart was no longer open. And for the first time, that made me feel safe. Emily cried in my arms, tiny fists curling around my finger. I whispered, it's okay. I'm here. Linda watched from the corner, exhausted but smiling. I said softly, she's beautiful. Linda replied, she's ours. My chest tightened. I knew the truth. I swallowed. Yes, ours, I said, letting the lie pass. Daddy, Emily squeaked, reaching for me. I held her closer. I'll protect you. My voice sounded hollow even to me. Linda glanced at me. You're quiet. I nodded. Just tired. Later, as Emily slept, I muttered, you don't belong to me, yet I love you. My hands traced her tiny features. The weight of truth sat heavy, but I decided I wouldn't expose anyone. Not her. Not Linda for now, I said aloud. She's innocent. She deserves normal. Linda came closer. Do you forgive me? I stared at her. I won't punish her publicly. She nodded. Relief? Guilt? I couldn't tell. I'm not forgiving yet, I said quietly. She flinched. I thought silence meant... I shook my head. It doesn't. Emily stirred. Dad? She mumbled. I smiled faintly. Yes, I'm here. She curled against me. My chest ached with a mix of love and emptiness. I thought, how can I care for her when she's not mine? That week, Jason showed up at the house, too confident. She's adorable, he said, leaning in. I kept my tone calm. Yes, she is. He smirked. You're okay with this? I said. Better than you think. He laughed. I knew you'd adjust, I replied. You're careless. He raised an eyebrow. Careless gets results, I said. Careless leaves messes behind. He didn't respond and left. Linda whispered later. You're distant. I said softly, I'm careful. She frowned. Are you hiding something? I smiled. No. She studied me, suspicious. You're different, I said. I'm awake. I started quietly arranging documents, separating finances, planning independence. Every signature, every form, I did in silence. I said aloud, step by step, no noise, no mistakes. Linda noticed nothing, believing my calm meant forgiveness. Emily began following me more, tiny footsteps echoing in the hallway. Dad, she said. I stopped. Yes, little one? She reached for my hand. I knelt and held it gently. I'm here, always. Her eyes searched mine. I swallowed. She knows something, I whispered. Everything's okay. At night, Linda asked, will you stay? I said, for her. She looked relieved. I thought, not for you, not for him, for her alone. Emily tugged my sleeve. Read to me, Dad. I smiled faintly. I read her favorite story, voice steady. Of course. Inside, I felt a storm, love clashing with reality, but I spoke softly, keeping the calm she needed. Later, I whispered to myself, I can't love her like I should, but I can guide her. Linda slept. Jason's arrogance lingered in my thoughts. I said, soon I'll leave quietly. Emily stirred again. Dad? I kissed her forehead. Always. My chest ached, but I stayed calm. I repeated the promise silently. Protect her, but never get trapped in lies again. My heart was heavy, but my resolve was heavier. This time, I would choose wisely, even if it hurt. I stood in the nursery doorway, watching Emily sleep. Whispering, I said, I'll love you on my terms. Nothing more. Need to fall. And for the first time, that was enough. I wrote the letter slowly, every word deliberate. I'm leaving, I whispered. I folded it and placed it on the table. No shouting, no drama, just truth. I stood, took a deep breath, and walked out. The door clicked behind me. The sound felt like freedom. Linda called immediately. Where are you going? I didn't answer. Her voice trembled. Open the door. I kept walking. The rain had stopped. The streets were empty. I felt light, almost like my chest had been emptied of all weight. A week later, Jason showed up at my apartment. You think you can escape me? He sneered. I said calmly, I'm not escaping anyone. He stepped closer. You took her away from me. I smiled. She was never mine, but neither is she yours. He froze, eyes wide. What did you say? I repeated. She was never mine, but neither is she yours. He stumbled back, disbelief on his face. You... what? I shrugged. I just stopped participating in lies. He left without another word. Linda's calls became frantic. Why are you doing this? I said in a text. Because it's the only way I stay sane. Her replies slowed. She realized the control was gone. Financial accounts were separated. I had Mark handle the legal details quietly. No fights, no lawyers screaming in court. Just clean, precise moves. Mark said, You did it well. No one can touch you now. I replied, I just wanted peace. He nodded. You'll get more than that soon. Karma tends to walk quietly. I laughed softly. I've never been patient. Maybe now I will be. Emily called one evening. Dad? I said, Yes, little one. She asked, Mommy is upset. Did I do something? I smiled faintly. No, sweetie, you did nothing. Everything is grown up. She sighed. I miss you. I whispered. I miss you too. I let her hang up first. Her voice lingered in my ears, a reminder of what I was leaving behind, but also what I had to protect by staying away. Linda texted, Why are you so calm? I replied, Because I stopped caring about things that aren't mine. She called, desperate. Please, just talk to me. I didn't answer. I walked by the river and said aloud, I've done enough. I'll do no more. Jason tried emailing me, sending threats and brags. I read one, laughed, and deleted it. You're pathetic, I whispered. He had believed he was untouchable. He wasn't. Not anymore. Mark called. Your accounts are secure. Everything under your control. I said, Good, that's all I need. He paused. You're doing the right thing, staying quiet. Let them crumble on their own. I nodded. That's the only revenge I'll ever need. Walking home later, I passed Linda's house. The lights were flickering. I imagined her panicking, realizing bills were overdue, lies exposed, trust shattered. I said softly, Karma doesn't yell. It whispers while you fall. I returned to my apartment and unpacked. Everything was minimal, controlled. I poured a cup of coffee. I said aloud, This is my life now, mine alone. I checked my phone. No calls, no messages. Silence. I smiled. Perfect. I opened a notebook and wrote, step by step, calm, controlled. Freedom isn't loud. It's silent. Emily's face appeared in my mind. I whispered, I'm protecting you by letting go. Later, Mark stopped by. You're finally at peace, he said. I nodded. It's quiet, but it feels like victory. He smiled faintly. Sometimes quiet hits harder than anger, I replied. Exactly. That night, I sat by the window, watching city lights. No guilt. No rage. Just calm, I whispered. I walked away without a scene, without begging, without yelling. And now, I can finally start my life. The rain began again, soft on the glass. I smiled. Clean endings feel better than messy beginnings. Everything behind me crumbled quietly. Everything ahead was mine. And for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. I heard a knock at the door late one night. I frowned. Who could that be? I muttered. I opened it slowly. Emily stood there, rain on her hair, tears streaming. Dad, she whispered. I pulled her inside. Emily, what's wrong? She sobbed. Mom, Jason, they're gone. Everything's broken. I guided her to the couch. Calm down. Breathe. She shook her head. I know everything about before. My heart skipped. What do you mean? She wiped her tears. About me, not being yours. I stayed silent. She stared at me. If I wasn't your blood, why did you love me? My chest ached. I swallowed hard. Because you were still you. She looked confused. Even when I wasn't really yours. I nodded. Even then. Emily hugged me tightly. I don't understand, I whispered. You don't have to. Just know I always cared. She stepped back slightly. So you weren't lying? I shook my head. Never. She sat, voice shaky. Mom, she's gone crazy. Jason, he left. We have nothing. I held her hands. I know, but I'll make sure you're safe. She glanced at me, eyes searching. Why didn't you ever come back? I said softly. Because leaving was the only way to protect you from the lies. Being close might have hurt you more. She nodded slowly, tears still falling. But I missed you. I smiled faintly. I missed you too, every day. Emily's voice trembled. Can you still be my dad? I thought about it. I couldn't undo the past. I couldn't let her think life was perfect. I can be your dad, in my way, I said. She nodded, gripping my hands. That's enough. She asked, Did you ever hate us? I laughed softly, though it hurt. No, I hated the betrayal, not you. She smiled weakly. Even when Mom lied, I squeezed her hand. Even then. Her tears slowed. I don't want to lose you again, I said. You won't. Not now. Emily leaned against me, trembling. Everything is falling apart, she whispered. I said, Some things fall apart so better things can stand. I've learned that. She frowned. So, what happens now? I thought for a moment. Now, we take it one step at a time. Together. She tilted her head. Together? I nodded. I'll protect you. I'll guide you. I won't make promises I can't keep, but I'll be here. Always. She smiled through tears. You're not leaving? I said. Not this time. Not from you. We sat in silence. I felt her small hands still clutching mine. I whispered, I never stopped caring. I never stopped thinking of you. That's the only truth you need. She nodded. I understand. Dad. Emily pulled me into another hug. I held her tight. I'm not perfect, I said softly, but I'm yours in every way that counts. She smiled faintly, trembling. That's enough for me. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, it was quiet. I thought of Linda, Jason, and the chaos they left behind. I whispered, Karma moves slowly, but it always catches up. Emily leaned against me, tired and wet, but safe. I said, "We'll survive this, little one. I promise." Her eyes closed, exhaustion taking over. I watched her sleep and whispered softly, "You are loved, not because of blood, but because you are you." For the first time, I felt the weight of the past ease, replaced by something steadier. Presence, care, and a bond no betrayal could undo. The doorbell rang. I hesitated, then opened it. Linda stood there, disheveled, eyes red, voice trembling. "Please, can we talk?" I didn't move. She stepped closer. "I know I ruined everything. I know I hurt you. I held up a hand. "Stop. Just stop." She sank to the floor. "I can't live like this," she said. "Jason, he's gone. Everything. Gone." I stayed silent, letting the words land. She looked up. "I begged him for us, and he left," I said quietly. "And now you feel it." Tears ran down her cheeks. "I need you. Please. I'll do anything. Anything." I shook my head. "Anything doesn't fix years of lies." She sobbed harder. "I was stupid, selfish." I said, "You were careless." She flinched. "I'm begging for forgiveness," I replied calmly. "I forgive, but I don't return." She gasped. You mean it?" I nodded. "Yes, forgiveness isn't for you, it's for me." She covered her face. "I thought I could control everything. I thought I could have you, the money, the family." I said, "Control was never yours. It never belonged to you." "I ruined my life," she whispered. "And yours too." I said softly, "You ruined yours first." Silence hung. She looked around, realization dawning. "I lost everything." I said, "Not everything. You still have yourself. But you destroyed what mattered most." Linda's voice cracked. "I didn't know how much I had until it was gone," I said. "That's the thing about choices. You only feel the weight when it's too late." She pressed her hands to her mouth. "Jason, he mocked me, humiliated me." I said, "He's paying for it. His career, his reputation, gone. Karma doesn't forget." She groaned, rocking slightly. "I didn't think it would hurt this much," I said. "Regret is the cruelest punishment. It never ends." She looked at me. "So you're happy?" I smiled faintly. "Not happy. Clear. Free. Alive. And you? You're learning the hard way." She whimpered. "I thought love was enough to hold you," I said. "Love is never enough for lies." She shook her head. "I miscalculated. Everything," I replied. "And that's your lesson. My life moved on while you drowned in your choices." Linda's knees shook. "I don't deserve your kindness," I said. "Kindness isn't for you. It's for me. I choose to leave without hatred. That's my victory." She leaned back, exhausted, silent. I stepped outside. No yelling, no pleading, just truth, just clarity. She called softly, "Will I ever see Emily?" I said, "She's safe, but not with you. She needs a life untouched by your mistakes." Her hands shook. I thought I had time." I said, "Time is only yours if you respect it." "You didn't. That's why you're here." I walked down the street. Rain fell lightly. I whispered, "This is my life now. My choice. My peace." Behind me, Linda's sobs echoed, faint but piercing. I thought of Emily, of Jason, of the years I lost and the lessons I gained. No confrontation, no revenge speeches, just clarity, just distance, just life moving on while others face the consequences of their own selfishness. I said aloud, "I am alive. I am free. That is enough." And for the first time in years, I felt nothing but calm, knowing that my victory was silent, lasting, and absolute. Linda realized too late what she lost. I smiled faintly and whispered, "Some lessons are learned only through pain, and I learned them already."